Hello, Stoned Apes and others who are curious about the healing powers of psychedelic medicines. Welcome to the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm your host, Stuart Preston. Each episode, I talk to another Stoned Ape, somebody who has experienced the transformational powers of psychedelics, or with a practitioner who works with these medicines. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with T. T shared her personal journey of being the daughter of Vietnamese immigrants to Australia, having to take on the mother role in her family, and dealing with the trauma that caused, eventually healing through yoga and psychedelics. She gets real with us, so please enjoy this episode with T. All right, T. Well, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm honored to have you, here and to hear your story and share your wisdom that you have for us. So thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So obviously the podcast is about sharing our stories of transformation. So maybe we could just jump in here and hear your story, like what was going on in your life and what called you to the medicine, and give us all the details to help anybody out there who may have been experiencing some of the same things in their lives.
How much time do you have?
As much as you need.
Oh God, because it's just endless, right? I think if we start talking about stories, there's just layers and layers and layers and layers and layers that gets built up and accumulated, as we grow and as we get older, and we have these different experiences and we meet people, we have these interactions, right? But I guess for me, if someone was to meet me now, they would be very surprised as to where I had come from or what my life looks like before the, as you said, the transformation.
Yeah.
And I don't really think of it as a transformation. I think it's just more of maybe a growth or an evolution. And, sometimes I think about it and I think about, holy shit, like I have changed so much. But then when I stay with that thought, like when I sit there and when I contemplate a little bit more, I have these little snippets of, but this stuff was there all along. There's just all this other stuff that piles up on top of it, and then we get clouded and we forget, right?
And you uncovered it.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, a lot of I do feel more transformation than I do pulling off layers of crud, because I felt like me as a little bit of a different person back then. But when you say that people who know you now that wouldn't recognize you from the past or vice versa, is there anybody you talk to now and you tell about how much you've changed and they look at you and say, no, you haven't really changed that much? Do you ever get that kind of feedback? Because I do. I've gotten that from my wife. She's like, yeah, you haven't changed that much. I'm like, well, I feel like I've changed a ton.
Yeah.
But maybe you're right. I mean, that's what you're saying. It's on the inside. It was already there, and now it's just kind of changing psychologically. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's beautiful that your wife says that, right? Because, I mean, this is just my opinion, but it's our essence, right, that she's recognizing. It's our essence that she's feeling. It's your essence that she's seeing and she's hearing. And that part of us does not change, right? That is like that place of truth when we're embedded in the heart spring.
Yeah.
But it's all the other shit that happens that, we can sort of, it feels like we're lost. It feels like we're a bit fucked up or whatever. But the essence of who you are is always there with you, So, I mean, for people that meet me now, right, it's like, okay, I can be seen as a psychedelic integration therapist or, a yoga teacher or a yoga teacher trainer or whatnot, right? And that is just very different to the life that I used to live. And the life that I used to live was the complete opposite of that. And so what does that involve? It involved, a lot of pain and suffering, and doesn't mean that I don't have pain and suffering now, right? It's inevitable. When we have a human experience, it is inevitable that we experience pain and suffering, right? The lows come with the highs. So, so my past life involved a lot of that, but I wasn't able to separate from that I was just completely engulfed in that. And so there was drugs and violence and gang activity and alcohol and just running an absolute muck, trying to
Mm.
distract myself, trying to find, connection and love, trying to find a sense of ease, if that makes any sense. Because my sober life was just too fucking painful.
Was there some deep-seated trauma there that you were covering up with? It doesn't sound like a therapist, but with these other behaviors, with the alcohol and the gangs and the drugs and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
definitely. And if you're familiar with Gabor Mate, right? He says that underneath every addiction, right? So he works a lot with addiction. He said underneath every addiction is trauma, but not
Yeah.
yeah, right. But it doesn't really work the other way around. So my addiction, definitely, I could sit here and trace back that there was a lot of trauma underneath there.
Mm.
And, I think growing up, so I am Australian or Australian born, if you
Okay.
can't by my accent. So hopefully your listeners can understand, because I've been told
Yeah.
that sometimes it's a little bit tricky. But,
Yeah. Sometimes us Americans, we can't tell.
yeah, I totally get that. Sometimes people think I'm from Scotland, which is, yeah, it's
Huh.
different, but
Yeah.
Mhm. But anyway, back to the topic. So I was born here, and my parents are Vietnamese. So they, had escaped the Vietnam War and traveled by boat and were refugees and, like all of that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So when they arrived in Australia, yes, they're finding a new life, right? But it's a very traumatic event for them. I mean, just imagine being ripped out of everything that you know, everything that you're familiar with, right? And back in the
Yeah.
day, it's not like we have Google. It's not like we have, TVs. It's not like we have the I guess the luxury of being able to explore the world without leaving the comfort of our own homes. It's like going to Pluto,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they, had left a war-torn country, arrived here. They actually met here, and then got married and then had me. So
Wow. So
I,
they came over as two individual people, refugees from Vietnam, and then met in Australia.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Mum fell in love with a muso, which is a musician.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. And so anyway, the love story started like that between mum and dad, and and then they had me, and it was really confusing growing up,
I
right?
bet.
So yeah, like I grew up, and being an only child, I have a younger sister, and there is a huge age difference between us. There's 16 years,
Mm.
and so I pretty much grew up as an only child, and being a female as well, right? My parents were very strict and very traditional,
Mm.
and I grew up in the family home, and it was very Vietnamese. I didn't know how to speak any English when I went to school.
Wow.
Yeah, so like we identify with that, right? We know that there are things that we identify with, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we believe that it's a part of us, and to a certain degree it is. So I identified with being a Vietnamese person, and then I go to school with all of my Aussie mates, and now I just have no idea what I am or who I am or what I'm
Mm.
identifying with, right? And then I start mingling with them, and then it's just like, holy crap, okay, like I feel like, I'm Aussie, but I feel like I'm Vietnamese, but at the same time, I feel like I'm none of the above. I come
Yeah.
home, I have these, very Western ways of being, and my parents are like, what the crap is going on to my kid?
Mm.
And then I go to school, and then I'm very Vietnamese, and then the people at school were just like, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, these days it's a lot more multicultural, but back then it
Back
wasn't.
then. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that alone was really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, when I was saying to you that I grew up as an only child and I was a female, right? So my parents were super strict because of that reason as well. There's a little bit more freedom if you're a boy. They feel like
Mm.
they don't need to worry about you as much.
Right.
Um,
But you, they
mhm.
had to protect.
Yeah. So I don't know if you feel the same with your daughter.
Uh, no,
Yeah.
I don't. But I'm different. I've had my transformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. I think it's really important. Because when I was little, I was told that I wasn't allowed to do many things because of my gender.
Mm.
And, I mean, they were just really little things like, oh, don't laugh like that. It's not very ladylike. Don't sit like that. It's not very ladylike. No, you can't
Right.
play drums because you're not a boy. No, you have to do this because you're a girl. No, don't. And it was just, like overwhelming to the point where I completely rejected my feminine side
Mm.
and went full blown the other way, right? And it became the biggest tomboy. And I carried that throughout most of my life. I've only just really reconnected with the feminine side, over the last few years. And it's a work in progress, right? Like I still have that masculine side to me.
Oh, do
Um,
you?
yeah, I do, definitely.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I always consider myself as having like a very feminine soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I go through ceremonies and whatnot, I feel that, and some other people can feel that. So I've never. Oh, I did meet one woman in ceremony who was a man in her past lives, so
Mm,
she still identifies with that. But
mm,
you're the first person I think that I've met who's at least said out loud that yeah, I have this masculine side.
mm.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, we all have masculine energy and feminine energy in us,
Yeah, I would
just which
agree.
was a little bit more powerful, right?
Hmm.
So for me, it was my rejection of the feminine that made me swing to the more masculine side.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, right. So I didn't have any female friends. I didn't play with any girl toys. I didn't like anything that girls did. I didn't dress like a girl. Um, I was one of the boys. I would, be their best man at the weddings. I would go to the Bucks nights. That was me,
Right.
right? Like one of the boys, like very just there.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I get that. And so out of that, so that was I mean, is that the root of the trauma?
No, well,
Did it lead to it?
I think it adds. I think all
It
these things,
adds.
right?
Yeah.
So, like I was saying to you at the start of the conversation, we go through our life and we collect, right? We collect experiences
Oh yeah, yeah.
and they form these stories in our mind and then we attach to them and we grip to them and they have this holding on us. And so, that was sort of the beginning of my story. That was the beginning of my identification. That was the
Hmm.
beginning of my pain. That was the beginning of the I don't fit in. Like, I have no idea what the fuck this is.
Yeah.
And, going to school, I didn't really, it just felt a little bit weird, Um, and I think now, upon reflection, I think the education system is a little bit skewed. I think learning is a very important skill that we all need to have. But it's just what is it that we've been taught, right? And,
Hmm.
and I was torn between Buddhism and being a Catholic as well, with my parents and then with school. And, I would say that it really started when in my early teenage years, I, started to get a little bit, um, I guess, a little bit more strong in my personality.
Hmm.
And it's probably, you're going through puberty and there's these hormones, right? It's a weird
Yeah.
time of life.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Your brain's
And
all scrambled.
oh God, yeah. Like you have no idea what's going on. You look awkward as shit. Like
Right.
everything's just awkward. Like you're not really fitting in your body anymore, right?
Hmm.
But, at that point in time, that was when my parents started to uh, have a difficult time
Mm.
within their relationship. And this is so common. It's not a special story. It's not anything like that. I mean, how many people do we know of, that they come from families that are with parents that are separated?
Well, it's just a lot of people who went through a terrible thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
diminish the fact that it's hard. You know what I mean? It
yeah,
just means a lot of us went through it.
yeah, yeah. And it's super hard. And my parents went through this like really ugly and long process of breaking
Mm.
up where it lasted for years and 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 years. And during that time, my mum fell pregnant with my sister. So this was when they weren't on good terms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she fell pregnant,
Wow.
and yeah, and so she had my sister. And here I am, 16 years old. My father is running amok. He's nowhere to be seen. Sometimes he comes back, and the next day he's like gone again or whatever.
Mm.
My mother is suicidal.
Mm.
I have a newborn now, at home. I myself now am suicidal, and I attempted a few times actually,
Oh.
unsuccessfully. Yeah. And, so now here I am at 16. I need to get my dad back. I need to look after my sister. So I take on the mother role, or the parental roles, actually,
Yeah.
both. And now I have to look after my mum, because she's clearly not capable of looking after anyone, right? Let alone
Yeah.
or herself, really, let alone anyone else.
It all just fell apart.
That's the way I saw it back then. Yeah, I used to think I came from a broken family, but I don't think that way anymore.
You don't?
Mm-mm. No,
How do you see it
no.
now?
I see it now as my family is perfect as it is, and that is actually imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, we grow and we evolve so much over time. We attach to what was, and we forget that everything changes. So I can sit here and be attached to the fact that, my family, right, means to be complete, means to have my mum and my dad together. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dad's changed so much, mum's changed so much, I've changed so much. Now there's, like I have my sister around. There's another, energy that's involved within this circle. Who's to say it's going to be exactly the same?
Right.
So it definitely isn't the same.
Can't be, can it?
It can't. It's impossible. So yeah, it's taken me a long time, but I've accepted that now. And of course, like these old wounds, they still come up again, and they still do. I can guarantee you that.
They do.
Um,
So as you work with plant medicines and psychedelics, some of these things still come up, and you see more layers and you learn more about it.
Hell yes.
Hell yeah, huh?
Hell yeah. I mean, whether it's plant medicine or whatever else it is that we decide to work with, these are all just different techniques and modalities and tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different that we have. You cannot expect that you sit in one ceremony. You cannot expect that like have one dose of something. You can't expect that you go to one class, right? You step on the yoga mat one time. You sit down and meditate for 15 minutes, half an hour a day, and your life's going to be absolutely amazing. You become this enlightened being, and you've just, gotten rid of all of your humanness. Like
Although
it's,
I hear people that do one ceremony, one dose, one journey, and come back, and they no longer have their draw to alcohol or their drug of choice.
yeah,
That's probably just one layer, because there's still all that trauma that was underneath that addiction, like you mentioned,
yeah, yeah.
and
I
that's
think so.
really where you got to get to.
Yeah. Well, Yes, and maybe. I think, we're all, I mean, as much as we're all the same, right? We all are individuals as well, and we have to honor that.
Hmm.
So, for some people, being able to get rid of an addiction to alcohol or whatever else it is, like, is all that they really need from that one modality, right? Be it,
Right.
whatever, be it ayahuasca or whatever it is that they've decided to partake in. But for other people, they might need a little bit more assistance from whatever it is. And who's to say that the person that drank Aya once and got rid of some addiction, or, worked with the Ibogaine or something,
Hmm.
um, right, and never touched that again, like, they're not working with other things. Like, they're not meditating, they're not journaling, they're not taking, hikes in nature, they're not doing breath
Right.
work, not going into sensory deprivation tanks. I mean, there are so many different tools, and psychedelics and plant medicines is just really one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
Mm,
point.
mm, mm,
So how did you come to the plant medicines? I mean, with this childhood and all that stuff you went through,
mm,
how did you end up, and was it, did you come into it ceremonially,
mm,
entheogenically, or did you come into it in a party atmosphere? Like I hear so many people say, yeah, I did mushrooms and LSD when I was younger in the parties, but then I rediscovered it later in life. I mean, what did your journey look like coming to the medicines and being where
yeah,
you are now?
yeah, I would say exactly that, the second. So, I mean, there's all this talk, and I think I might, write something about that pretty soon and then put that
Mm,
up. Yeah, there's just been a feeling inside me that I feel like it's time to share this, right?
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I started, using these medicines, which back then I called them drugs.
right.
But I started using these medicines at a really, really, really young age.
Really?
Um, yeah, and lots, like lots,
Wow.
right? Yeah, lots, high amounts. I don't know. I don't know if it was because I was just that fucked, or, my body has a high tolerance. I mean, now I know that I do have a high tolerance.
Hmm.
Um, but, like, the combination of those two things is just, poof, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say that my relationship with them started in my teens.
Wow.
And yeah, and although it looked very different, to, how my relationship with these medicines looks now, whether I like it or not, or whether, anybody else likes it or not, my relationship started then and there,
So
right?
how do you feel it actually started then and there? What evolved or carried from doing it as a recreational drug as a
Mm-hmm.
young human that
Mm-hmm.
evolved? I mean, how you said your relationship started then. How do you recognize that that's when it started as opposed to not recognizing that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, why would I know that you didn't have, this recreational side of you pre working
Yeah,
with plant medicine,
right.
but, I want to ask you, why do you think it is that people do reach to these substances, right, at a recreational level?
The psychedelic substances?
All of it. Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know. I don't know that I'm qualified to have an answer to that. My guess would be a judgment. It would be maybe some of them they reach for them to cover up feelings or emotions. Maybe sometimes they do it to overcome inhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think a lot of people end up with psychedelics in almost an accidental way, thinking it's going to be like an opiate or a cocaine or something, and then they take these things and it kind of slams them in the head, and they're like, "Oh, that wasn't what I was really expecting."
Yeah, yeah. Holy crap, I've just connected to God.
Yeah, well, I wasn't, that wasn't the trip I was expecting, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I think a lot of people don't seem to come away with an understanding of the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the seed got planted, but I have talked to some people that definitely do, that they were like, wow, I was doing this at, in a party. Some friends gave me this stuff and I ate it. and I ended up having this amazing experience that really helped me get new direction in my life. So it was
Mm.
kind of by accident
Yeah.
it got there. But I don't know. What's your answer?
Well, I mean, just touching on what you just said, there's definitely that side, right, where people would, like take these medicines and then have this amazing experience, an unexpected amazing experience when they're able to, I don't know, I guess like feel love or oneness, have some sort of a mystical insight, right?
Hmm.
Connect to God. They're able to let go of some things, and then some people, have to be there and sit with some of their traumas that they have.
Yeah.
And this is what, we know of as a bad trip, right?
Hmm.
Um, but, it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? So for me, when I was younger, right, it was, and I didn't really have the conscious awareness of all of this, of what I'm saying right now. So
Hmm.
it was done really blindly, and I was
Hmm.
with a group of friends that were also just as lost as I was.
Right.
Right. Um, so, I would, like take copious amounts of whatever it is to either numb the pain that I was going through, right? To
Yeah.
have a good time, to just forget about the stuff that was going on at home, to, for that moment, maybe not, be so attached to the responsibility of trying to save my family and save myself at the same time. Right? Remember, I
Mm.
was suicidal. So, and the, because I was so masculine, right? There is this thing where I think it's changing now. I can see it changing. It's still very so much so there, but the men, right, are perceived as the strong ones, the ones that need to keep their shit together, the ones that need to fix things, the ones that
Hmm.
don't show emotion, the ones that don't break down. And I know you've spoken about this before as well within yourself when you lost your son,
Hmm.
right? And so I was, that was how I operated.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, and I had come in and taken over my dad's role now, right? And I'm like the husband to my mom and like the father to my sister, and right. So like I was very masculine. And so, one of the really beautiful things actually, during that time in my life was that when I was under the influence, not all the time, because it wasn't my intention, right? And it wasn't really something that I wanted to do. But when I was under the influence, when I had the assistance of these medicines in me, at that point in time, like if my surroundings were right, right? So set and setting.
Hmm.
There was no set, but if the setting was right, at that point in time was when I was able to open up
Hmm.
and be vulnerable and talk about how fucked it is that I was actually feeling, right? To share what it is that was really going on. I mean, you look on the outside and you just see, this person that is, everything's fine, she's really strong, she's got her shit
Right.
together. But on the inside, I was broken in a million pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if that's not beautiful, right? If that's didn't allow me an opportunity to really speak from my heart, I don't know what is. So we can, yeah, I mean, we can sit here and say that, oh, you shouldn't use it recreationally and all that sort of stuff. And I wouldn't, say, oh, yeah, like go do this, go do that. But if that's where they are, that's where they are. And there's a purpose to it. It's like, how do we minimize harm?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. All the way around, even
Mm,
even medicinally or whatever, to minimize that harm. But
mm.
you had that recreational experience that you were able to finally open up and talk and see, kind of break through that shell you had created.
Yeah, just, during that time, and that was it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know anything about integration. It was like a little release, a little relief, and then boom, right? As soon
Right.
as it's
Right
gone,
back in. Did it leave
But
like a little seed? Did it plant a seed that kind of grew, or you could kind of go back and recognize and say, that was interesting
yeah, I would
before it
say
all
so.
was gone?
I would say so. Yeah, because I knew that, I had difficulty opening up. I
Hmm.
always bottled everything inside. I wouldn't shed a tear. Like I wouldn't show anyone that I was crying as well. If I needed to cry, I'll go into the bathroom, turn on the shower, sit down, like
Hmm.
in the movies, right?
Right.
Have a bit of a sob and then quickly pull myself up together and then go out and boom, there you go. Okay, everything's
Wow.
all, yeah, yeah.
You've got a unique perspective on men.
Why do you say that?
The way you cover up your feelings and had to be the strong one, and the the experiences you had,
Mm,
like you said, it's some of these are masculine in nature,
mm,
and having lived it or put yourself through that, I think it would give you a perspective that not everybody has.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. It feels really nice to hear that, actually.
Does it?
Yeah, for some reason,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's hard. I don't have a penis and, two testicles, right?
Hmm.
But, you know, in some way, I can relate a little bit, just a little bit, because I'm not a man, So in some way, I can relate a little bit. And if it was that hard for me, right? Like I just can't imagine how hard it would be to actually be in a man's body and have to put up with this shit that, you're a man, like you shouldn't be crying. It's, you should be blah, 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 blah. Right? Like that's shit.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I
really,
wonder. I wonder how much that has to do with anatomy, or just purely sociological. That just you're
mm,
raised that way, but you're told that way, and you experienced a lot of that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, that's an interesting question. And I think it might be a mixture of both. I mean, if you look at where we came from or, you know, yeah, just when we were living in tribes and whatnot, the men would go out and they would hunt, right? And they would do like that kind of work, whereas the women would look after the children and the village and, like get everything, get the meals ready and all that. So, I mean, there's feminine and masculine energy in there that is very different, whether we like it or not. It doesn't mean that that energy is only for the man or that the energy is only for the woman,
Hmm.
but it's there,
Yeah.
right?
But like you've done, you can learn the other side.
Oh yeah, you can definitely learn the other side and you can attach to the other side too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So let's talk about some plant medicine stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, we talked about how you got introduced at a very young age with some
Hmm.
large doses and some unique experiences that were not followed up with, proper integration.
Hmm.
Um, where are you now, and how have the plant medicines helped in your
Hmm.
life? And if you want to share any experiences, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. But what kind of things have you, because now you do this professionally, now you're in this, you know what I mean? But before you really got to that point, what was your journey like, getting to this point with the medicines?
Yeah. Well, what actually happened was before my relationship with these medicines shifted, was that I developed a relationship with yoga.
Oh.
Yeah. So for some reason, and again, right, I was very masculine. For some reason, there was just this thing, this calling, this message, whatever, right? Yoga, 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 yoga. I never
Hmm.
thought about it before. I thought yoga was for girls. It was just something that I would not do, right?
Right.
But for
Hmm.
some reason, this calling was just so strong that I had to go.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I went to a class. It was just, like a local class at, a suburban studio. And I immediately fell in love with the practice
Hmm.
for some reason or another. I guess I was just ready. And as I started to practice more and more and more, I mean, I was doing multiple classes a day, like it was intense, right? Yeah, as I started practicing, I something began to change. So what happened is that, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I think when we start to engage in practices like that, right,
Yeah.
energetically, our body is, we have an energetic body. Energetically, things begin to shift and move. So, all of a sudden, I'm like a crying mess, right? In class. All of a sudden, I'm like a lot softer. All of a sudden, I'm watching what I'm eating. All of a sudden, as my internal landscape began to change and soften, so did my external. Right? And
Interesting.
yeah. And so that was when things began to shift. And, by that point in time, I was sort of, actually, I'm not too sure, so I'm not going to say it because I could just be making shit up. But yeah, during that process, I started, and it happened really quickly, Stuart. It was like I did my first class, and then all of a sudden I'm doing workshops, and then I'm, doing teacher trainings, and I'm just like, I'm balls deep in this practice.
Right.
And so during that time, right, I became a lot more mindful. I became a lot more present. And when I was working with these medicines, it was completely different. So now there's intention, right? Whereas
Hmm.
before there wasn't. And there's the ability now to reflect. And I didn't start with ceremonies. I didn't sit with a shaman. I didn't have a guide. I didn't have a sitter. I mean, I would say that I'm pretty experienced, with working with these things by myself. So I
Right.
was enough to do that. And I was just like diving in. And, the beautiful thing about psychedelics and plant medicines is that it's almost like it's not easy, right? Like by no means is the journey guaranteed to be an easy one. And what happens after you're finished with the journey is going to be an easy ride for you in terms of the work that needs to be done and the integration.
Yeah.
But it's almost like it's like a cheat code. So when you play a game, like a video
Hmm.
game,
Hmm.
yeah, and then you punch in a cheat code, and then all of a sudden, like boom, you're done, right?
Right. Yeah,
Psychedelics.
I've never done that. I'm not much of a gamer, but I've watched other people do that.
Yeah, well, I grew up with, like a Nintendo 64 and the Sega Master System and stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, and so, psychedelics is like you're playing a game, you put in a cheat code, which is when you take the medicine, right?
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't mean that you've clocked the game, as in you've finished the game, but it might take you to the boss level of that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you do what you need to do or whatever. And then when that's done, your journey's finished. Okay, now here is the work, right? You're at that next stage now. You've advanced.
Hmm.
So something like yoga, right? A practice like yoga, which is not just about, doing downward facing dogs and, making these shapes with your body. There's so much more to that. It's like how you live. It's how you think. It's how you speak. It's what you put in your body. It is, meditation. It's breath work. It's concentration. It's contemplation. It's like so many things.
Hmm.
But like the practices like that requires so much work and dedication and consistency and patience to be able to get you a snippet, right? The experiential snippet of what psychedelics can do like that.
Right.
You know what I
So
mean?
yeah. Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
know what you mean. So what do you have an example of a time when you took the medicines and got that insight like that, like what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. It was with psilocybin.
Psilocybin.
Yeah. That it's such, I think they call it magic mushrooms for a reason.
Yeah, or the teachers.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And it was that it was when I had that experience of everything is one and I am
Mm.
God. I rejected that term God, right? Because I was a
Yeah.
Catholic and I was, brought up in a Catholic school. but my parents were Buddhist, right? But anyway, I really rejected that term. But I experienced God, and I experienced that I was God, and that we are all one, and it's infinite, and there's no such thing as death,
Mm.
and it's just that mystical, blissful state. I mean, I love to write, and I came out of this journey and I thought, yeah, I'm going to write about this. It was like
Yeah.
freaking amazing. There was so much. And I picked up a pen and I struggled, because how can we box, such an infinite experience into words?
That's what you
Right?
felt when you tried to write. You're like, how can I use mere words for what I just experienced?
Yeah. Yeah, I could
Yeah. Wow.
possible. I can try. It's a pretty shitty attempt, right?
Yeah.
Because by doing that, I mean, it loses so much of its I don't know, like its
Yeah.
power, magic. And I mean, I'm even struggling to speak about it now.
Yeah, no, I
But
totally get it. There are times I come out and I want to journal and I'm just like, well, how do I write that?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah. But I think for those of us that have had some sort of a mystical experience with these medicines, like we understand that it's absolutely profound, right? And I mean,
Hmm.
I've had like moments of experiencing these states of bliss and oneness, during a practice or during meditation, and quite easily during breath work, right? Because we can switch, we can alter our states of consciousness really easily.
Hmm.
uh, but it's not like a 5-hour trip or anything like that, where the
Right.
experience is just there in it, and it's just like that is your reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was when I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's the quote, the tip, mystical experience
Mm,
that,
yeah,
some people have with psilocybin.
yeah, yeah. And I think, once we have these mystical experiences with psilocybin or whatever else it is that, you feel called to work with, then when you go back to practices such as yoga or whatnot, right, it's like, yeah, like I've been there already. I know that it exists. It's not a theory anymore,
Yeah.
you know?
Interesting.
There's a big difference between theory and having the actual experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So when it comes to psychedelics, you mentioned a couple times, I think already, mind and mindset. What are the important things people need to know and do and prepare for or be ready in order to have a good um, spiritual entheogenic journey? And I'm not saying good trip, bad trip. You know what I mean? Because sometimes the bad trip can be every bit as good as a good trip, right? But to go into it and have a real experience with the medicines, what do you think the keys to that are?
Yeah.
Because I know you guys, you help people with the preparation leading up to a
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So what, like, and you don't have to give everything away, but what are the keys to anybody sitting out there listening and they're just thinking, okay, yeah, what, I can't just go buy a bag of mushrooms and devour them and have this mystical experience. I mean, you might by accident, right? But what are
Yeah.
the ways to try to get the most out of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we do is we call it a pre-integration, right? So,
Pre-integration.
yeah,
Okay.
super for the journey. And you're right, there is a bit of preparation to be done if, this is something that you're actively seeking in order to, whatever it is that your intention is. I mean, we all have different intentions, right?
Hmm.
Um, and, it's important to be able to prepare for these things because, I mean, just think about it, right? If we have trauma that's there, and if you're not properly prepared, it's very easily to re-traumatize yourself.
Mm.
And it's not just working with psychedelics, it's with any other thing. Like if you don't have a foundation, if someone doesn't have a foundation of some sort, right? It's very easy to re-traumatize, and that can be detrimental.
Oh yeah, I never even thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, having some sort of a foundation is absolutely essential. So the way that we do it is that we work with the person one-on-one, and we again, everyone is different, but we sort of discuss what your intentions are. We get them ready. We speak to them about how to set up the space. Make sure that they have the right mindset before they go in, and what it is that can happen, like all of these things there. It's kind of like uh, harm reduction.
Hmm.
But the person really needs to be ready for it, and only they will know whether or not they're ready. And
How do you help them know when they're ready, or how do they know? How can somebody out there that doesn't even have access to your services, how do they know when they're ready?
you just know.
You
How do
just
you know?
know,
How do
and
you know?
you gotta know that you have to get to that point before you take this leap. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to be honest with yourself about that.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Because I mean, you're not um, going in it to have a good time.
yeah, because you may
You know,
not have a good time at all.
because you may not have a very good time.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the process, right? And there is
Hmm.
a lot of valuable lessons to learn in those moments where we don't have a good time with these trips. But if the person is there and they think, I'm just going to have a good time, or my mate did it and he said it was really amazing, it can be a shit show. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be. I don't know whether or not it's going to be for sure, but I have, a responsibility and a duty of care to say whether or not I feel like I am comfortable enough to work with this person, right? Or for
Yeah,
them to go ahead. I can just suggest it, but ultimately it's up to them whether or not they want to do it. But you have to be ready, and it has to be for you. It has to feel right. And as I'm saying this, I'm like touching this area because
yeah, touching your heart.
it has to come from the heart. It's
Yeah,
like when the calling is so strong, like you just know, there's no doubt, there's no thinking anymore. It's just yes. It's like a yes. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, I have to do this.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you do the pre-integration.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready. You're drawn to this by your heart, and you decide to do it, and you do it. And it's kind of like you mentioned when you were young, and you had these experiences, but there was nothing following it, so it just kind of got closed back up like a treasure chest.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what do people need to know if they go into this? They did the pre-work and they go into a journey and they come out of it and they have these amazing insights, right? Like you said, you can get all these amazing insights with one psychedelic experience,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to know what to do with that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Afterwards, you need to know. You can't just walk away and go, "Oh, I'm cured," right? I mean, you can feel
Yeah.
that way, but there's got to be some follow up afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. There has to be some follow up, and consistency is key, and that's why sometimes having someone there to support you is really important. Especially if it's someone that, and I'm not talking about myself or anything here,
Hmm.
right? It's really important as well to work with someone that has some idea of what it's like to be working with these medicines. What I mean? Like you can have your mum supporting you, but if she has got no idea about what it's like to go through some of these experiences, then the support can only go so far, and you
I think
have.
about that. It's I've been through these experiences,
Mhm.
but because I was inside the experience, I don't really know how I would react to watching somebody else having the experience.
Mm,
So if somebody brought me in as a trip sitter, I might feel totally unqualified. I might feel like, well, I wasn't really there when this was happening.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I don't know. I might look at them and go, wow, I don't know. Are they having a great time? Are they having a hard time? Do they need my help? And then I would start freaking out.
yeah, yeah, for
So it
sure.
seems
And
like it can be, you have to, even as a trip sitter, you probably need to know more than just the experience. You probably need to know a little bit about how to be a good trip sitter, how to be a good guide, all
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, there must be something involved in being good at that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I'm really grateful for. So I didn't mention before, but I really don't think I learned much from this. But I managed to get myself into university somehow
Nice.
through all of that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So there was I studied a bachelor of psychology, and then
Hmm.
I did arts for a bit after that, and then I didn't really like humans anymore, so I did vet nursing.
Yeah.
Then after that, I went in and I did a Bachelor of Social Sciences, majoring in youth work, wanting
Hmm.
to focus on the drug and alcohol field. And then I got into yoga, right? So I say that I don't think that has really done anything for me. But maybe it has, at least, it's gotten me to think about harm reduction and all of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
but like it was really truly like the yoga and life experience that has just, yeah, that's been number one, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, like if, say for example, if a friend is asking you to, like be a trip sitter or whatever, I mean, it's impossible to know, right? Like I could sit there and look at someone and it's impossible to know whether or not they're having a good time or they're having a really challenging experience. And at that point in time, their brains are so malleable. Anything that you say or do or suggest can completely turn their trip the other way. You
Yes, you have
know,
to be careful. That's why I'm wondering people talk about having somebody be there, a trip sitter or whatever, but it sounds like, there's got to be something behind it.
yeah, yeah. You got to be really careful with who it is that you choose. I would say do your research, get to know the person, get familiar, make sure that you feel comfortable with them, make sure that you trust them, make sure that they are, not going to project their own shit onto you, that they're not there and trying to teach you
Mm,
something, that they're not trying to guide your experience into a certain way, right? That they're trying to direct something. They're really there just keeping your body safe. If it, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's all it could, because it's your experience,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even if somebody's working on this and looking to do it and they just want somebody there just to be sure, just to make sure they're safe, they should get that person oriented and some training or some resources to understand
Mm.
what it is they're actually doing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I talked to have you heard of the entheo nurse?
Hmm.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. He teaches ER nurses and doctors how to not overreact if
Mm.
somebody gets brought in when they're undergoing a bad trip, essentially. You know what I mean? Is don't just start jabbing needles into their arms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is you can just put them in a nice soft space and let them work through it. It's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing with a good trip sitter is, know what not to react to.
Yeah. Totally. That is so important. And I'm so glad that there are people like that, doing work like that, because it's really, really, really important, especially now that, there's so much talk around psychedelics and these other medicines, right?
Yeah.
There's so much research that's being done more and more. It's really, really important. And I mean, I would be, this is just my personal opinion, like some people really want to go down this route, but I would be so concerned going to, my local psychiatrist and asking them whether or not they would want to, guide me through an experience or just watch my body when I, blast
Hmm.
myself into like some other realm. Because just because they're a psychiatrist doesn't mean that they're well equipped for this kind of work,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you know?
Yeah,
So
I can't imagine myself going to a psychiatrist for that.
yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah,
guess it depends on if they're trained and what their experiences are.
exactly, exactly. So it goes a lot deeper than, the certificate that's hanging up on your wall.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
me, I think anyway.
Um, One thing I like to ask people is about stigma.
Mhm.
So obviously you watched my Stone Ape show, so you know a
Yeah.
big part of that is trying to break stigmas, right,
Mhm.
around mental health and suicide and psychedelics.
Mhm.
And if with everything you do and
Mhm.
have done personally that you do professionally, have you had to deal with any pushback, any stigma from this? Was there any fear in kind of making this, part of your living?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I would be a liar if I said nah.
No. So there's still, even for somebody like you, there's still some of that out there, huh?
Oh yeah. And especially with this day and age now where um, you know, people can hide behind screens and whatnot, right? It's
Oh yeah. Screen
yeah,
names even.
yeah, it's very much there. But I mean, you got to think about what's happened, right, in throughout history with these medicines. No wonder there's a stigma. It's not a surprise that there is a stigma by any means, but um, what do we do? Like, what do we do with it, right? What do we do with it? Well, I think what we can do with it, all that we can do with it really is work on ourselves, you know,
Hmm.
and people will be able to see the difference or at least feel the
Yep.
difference. And that I think is going to be a lot more efficient in passing on the message that these medicines are absolutely amazing and they're here to help us than speaking about it, right?
Yeah.
Because actions speak louder than words. But in saying that, speaking about it is really, 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 really vital. So what you're doing, Stuart, with having podcasts like these and creating conversations around subjects such as this, is really, really, really important. Because where else are we going to get the information?
Yeah, and luckily there's people doing that because I know Jim's got a podcast where he's talking to people. I think a lot about
Yeah.
recovery stuff, and you guys at Gold Cap Integration Network have this amazing Facebook group where people get together and talk, and so you guys are really giving people a good safe place to get
Mm.
these stuff out and talk. And so I'm grateful to you too for doing that. So what else? So we're getting to the end here. What else do you want to get out? What do you want to share? What do you want to talk about?
I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, of course, and thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. You're very welcome. But these medicines are extremely healing, helpful, magical. I think we've known now for a very long time that the tradition, oh, not traditional, sorry, but the conventional model um, doesn't really work.
Hmm.
And, because of that reason and the way that we have been living, it's no wonder that the human species is coping with the stress and the sadness that's here in some really, really, really interesting ways.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it in anxiety, we're seeing it in depression, we're seeing it in our addictions, and it's not just addictions to heroin and methamphetamines or anything
Right.
like. It's addiction to social media and your phone and technology and like all of this other stuff, right?
Hmm.
Which takes us away from who we really are, like our true essence. It takes us away from our ability to connect. And so, what we're seeing now is there is an imbalance. And, if you feel the calling and you have to feel it in your heart, like it has to be something that, like, for sure, right?
Yeah.
Um, then it's something that's definitely worth exploring. And there is actually not can be, there is still a lot of stigma around it. But I think if you really dig, you'll find the right people. And I don't even think it's like if you really dig, right? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah. You'll
Everything,
find your community.
yeah, totally. And yeah, the journey is going to be absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, particularly for people that come from a very conventional background, that there's a lot of fear with
Hmm.
this, with
Yes.
yeah, for themselves, and they're committing a crime, and what about their families and their partners and all of that sort of stuff. But it's detrimental that we work on ourselves, and whether it be with psychedelics, whether it be with some other modality, we've got to start looking inwards. Like, we need to start attending to these places that have been calling and crying for our attention and our love for so long, and we've
Right.
just neglected them. This is what it is. That's what it is. I think psychedelics, I think yoga, they're both paths to the same place, and that place is that path back to the heart. That's it.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We definitely need to take a look at that. Yeah. Well, that's a great message. That's a great way to wrap this up. So thank you so much, T, for doing this and joining me here. What a fabulous conversation, and I'm truly grateful that you took your time to do this.
No, thank you so much, Stuart.
That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.